Okay, good evening, everyone. This is the licensing subcommittee this evening. First item on the agenda is the election of chair. Could I have nominations for the chair, please?
I nominate Councillor Gordon.
I second that.
Thank you. And Councillor Gordon is in the chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now moving on to item 2 on the agenda, which is apologies for absence. I don't think any apologies have been received.
There are no apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. And then agenda item 3 is declarations of interest from members. Are there any declarations? No. Okay, so we're now moving on to agenda item 5, which is the licensing subcommittee hearing procedure. Everybody here should have already been circulated with a copy of the procedure, and it also appears in your meeting packs. But I'm just going to very briefly run through a few important points for this meeting. So we have some protocols in place. We only speak when invited to by myself as the chair. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand, and I will obviously do my best to look out for you and direct all communication via me. Will everyone ensure that their mics are muted when they're not speaking? When speaking, try and be succinct and don't exceed the allocated time frames, which will be highlighted at the start of the meeting for each participant. If you're referring to any documentation pages or reports, please direct us to the page number. If you're having technical difficulties, please use the chat function to alert the officer or the dial-in on the phone. The chat function will also be recorded, as will be this meeting, so only use it for formal questions that are relevant to the procedure. Don't use it for other issues. And anyone who behaves disruptively will be removed from the meeting. So I think those are the main, fairly straightforward points I'd like to bring to your attention. So we're now moving on to the hearing procedure. So this appears in agenda item. This is a standard proceeding for all hearings. Shall I briefly run through it, or are people familiar with it? Would you like me to run through it, Clifford? Amanda? Yeah, okay. So we've appointed a chair. So we then have the procedure. The licensing officer will outline the report. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their case in support of the application. You've got 5 minutes for that. I will then invite the relevant authorities in attendance to highlight their reasons for objecting to the application as contained within the report if applicable, and there's 5 minutes for that as well. There'll be an opportunity for other persons in attendance to present their case, highlighting their reasons for objecting or supporting the application as contained in their written submissions. There's 5 minutes for that as well. We will then have a discussion where myself and my 2 colleagues, Councillor Emma and Councillor Odds, will structure a discussion, trying to clarify any points and also identifying the main issues in relation to this application and asking questions. We'll then proceed on to closing remarks. I will be asking the responsible authorities, at the other person's presence, the applicants and the licensing officer, if they've got any final comments to make. These should only be in relation to issues raised during the discussion, so no new points to be made there, and there's 10 minutes for that in total. Then we'll have an opportunity to seek clarification on any points raised, and we'll then conclude the discussion. The subcommittee will normally withdraw to consider the evidence that's been presented to them with the subcommittee officer and the legal advisor so that we can reach a decision. And the legal advisor will repeat any legal advice given to the members upon returning to the public meeting. In some cases, we may not consider it necessary to retire, particularly simple ones. We will then return, the chair will announce the decision, the reason for the decision will be given if appropriate, and the licensing officer will draw attention to any restrictions that affect the running of the premises and provide a written record of the decision which will be sent to the applicant. So does anyone have any questions on the procedure or anything to add? Thank you. We're now moving on to agenda item 6. This is the application for a premises licence and appears on your pack in page 3. This is a premises licence for the Dalston Hotel at 130 Kingsland High Street, Hackney, London E8. I will now invite the Principal Licensing Officer present, Suba Shiramana, to outline the report. Suba, if you'd like to outline the report, thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Licensing Service received an application for a premises license under the Section 17 of the Licensing Act 2003 for 130 Kingsland High Street for the hours stated in the agenda. The licensing authority and the other person's representation remains. The applicant and one of the OPs has provided additional information which has been circulated. I have nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Suba. I'd like now to invite, I understand, the applicant's representative, Luke Elford, council, who I understand is present to make representations on behalf of the applicant. Can you bear in mind the time limits? Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. My name is Luke Elford. I am the solicitor for the applicant Eden Limited, and I appear on their behalf this evening just to briefly introduce the individuals that I have with me, who are also in attendance at this meeting, should you need to hear from them. I have Laura Threepleton, who is a development associate for Eden. I have Christopher Penabad, who is a development manager for Eden. Matt Brierley, who is the director of openings for Eden, and also Andy Bamber, who is a consultant whose report appears within your agenda papers. I'm going to start by using the question that I'm going to ask you at the very end of my presentation, which is, why wouldn't you grant this application? And that is the question I will ask you at the very end of this. I'd like to deal, first of all, with what this premises is, because it seems that there has been a degree of misunderstanding in relation to the application. Throughout the objections, there is reference made to a large club premises. It's not. This is a hotel, and it's an extremely well-appointed one. Chair, I'm just going to have to pause for 2 seconds. I have an animal that is jumping onto the table. Bear with me for 2 seconds. I'm going to shut it out. I do apologise.
That's fine.
Sorry about that. Hopefully there will be no more interruptions from the local wildlife. As I said, this is a hotel, and an extremely well-appointed hotel at that. It's a business that sells sleep. But as such, it also has a food and beverage offer, like most other hotels. The food and beverage offer is primarily for guests of the hotel, but as with most other hotels in the country, the food and beverage offer is also available for members of the public as well. There are, as you've heard, outstanding objections from your licensing officer and from local residents and a residents association. Primarily, those objections are about the location of the hotel in your cumulative impact area, rather than the hotel itself being a source of problems, but I will come on to those in due time. And that is, of course, okay. The applicant has always been aware that the application site falls within a cumulative impact area, and they've prepared the application accordingly. And we have a submission found within your supplementary bundle at pages 5 onwards, a specific statement dealing with your cumulative impact area policy. We've also included, just as a snapshot, some of the many emails of support that we've had in relation to this application. They can be found at pages 64 to 67 of your supplemental agenda. Our case is simply that if the application is granted, it will not negatively add to the problems in the area. Far from it, far from being a source of problems in the area, we believe that this application is granted is likely to help with some of those problems. I'd like to go over some of the key points that we've raised in relation to your cumulative impact policy, because that is the key policy in relation to this application. First of all, the type and style of premises and the impact that will have on the licensing objectives. I've already told you that this premises is a hotel. It's also important for you to consider the type and style of hotel on offer here. My clients operate a number of similar premises throughout the country and in Ireland. And if you turn to page 68, although it may be easier to turn to page 67 and work forwards, you will get a flavour of the style of operation that my clients envisage at Dalston Lock. These are premises that are light and airy, and they aren't simply designed for the type of customer that is likely to cause problems in your cumulative impact area. The second thing I would like to discuss is the measures that are proposed by the applicant in relation to the licensing objectives. The application was accompanied by an extremely well thought out operating schedule, or list of conditions, if you will, that deal with how the premises will operate. Further conditions have been discussed and agreed with your police licensing officer and with your environmental health officer. And I would ask you to remember that any breach of those conditions by my clients is a criminal offence, and it is absolutely imperative for them and for their business that they don't allow this premises to become any kind of issue whatsoever. And I would submit that if they did, the very first people that will be disturbed in this case are the hotel's own residents. They are the closest residents, and that does not make for a successful hotel operation. We're of the view that it's not appropriate and proportionate for the promotion of the licensing objectives to further condition this application in the event that you are minded to grant it. Bear in mind that there are a whole host of other things that the hotel operator will do above and beyond the scope of the Licensing Act. That includes everything from an environmentally friendly policy and looking at carbon emissions to supporting local interest groups. Your licensing policy identifies that the track record of an applicant alone may not be sufficient to persuade you to grant an application in a cumulative impact area. That is true. However, the proven track record of an applicant, in particular this applicant, from a hugely successful hotel operator, should be highly persuasive to you, particularly when stacked alongside all of the other measures that are proposed here. And I don't have time to go through all of those in detail for you. I've already explained that the applicant runs a number of other hotels around the UK and in Ireland. What I haven't told you is that in relation to any of those other premises, there has not been one single issue, one single cause for complaint from either a responsible authority or a member of the community. And details of the companies are included within your pack, and I hope you find those useful. The objections, of course, focus on things that are inherently negative, but it is quite true also that well-run licensed premises can be of a significant benefit to an area. And that is particularly true in the case of hotels, because they are 24-hour premises, they are staffed 24 hours a day, and in effect, the people of the hotel become local residents in of themselves. Good premises will report issues to your responsible authorities, and that will allow your responsible authorities to build up a more accurate picture of what is happening on the ground and to tailor any enforcement action accordingly. In my note on cumulative impact, I mentioned to you the case of Brewdog. It is only a magistrate's court decision, and you are not duty bound to follow it. However, the reason for deciding the way the case was decided in Brewdog is an interesting insight into a case where a good operator was refused an application in a cumulative impact area. In that case, the district judge said that the council had got it wrong by keeping out a good operator, and that good operators should be welcomed with open arms, because if you keep them out, you only drive down standards by not allowing the new in. I now need to deal with the elephant in the room, and I say in the room, we would be in the room if it wasn't for COVID-19. COVID-19 has completely changed the landscape for operators of licensed premises, and indeed for all of us. And it will continue to have a huge economic impact that will be felt for years to come. Cumulative impact doesn't sit still, and like the tide, it ebbs and flows. I would suggest to you that COVID-19 will see a particular ebb in cumulative impact in your cumulative impact areas within Hackney for the foreseeable future. And it may be the case that there is no longer any need for the policy that you have in place in Dalston when the true effects become known. COVID-19 also offers opportunities for you as a council, and you are going to be presented with options as to how you want to improve your fiefdom moving forwards. One way that you can do that is to grant premises licenses to good premises, to good operators, as it will give local economies a much needed boost. I must of course deal with the objections, and you will find in your bundle a report from Mr. Bamber, who is a licensing consultant, and that is at page 21 onwards of your supplemental agenda. He is here to answer any questions you may have regarding his report and regarding crime and disorder. He is an extremely experienced former borough commander and head of community safety at a neighbouring local authority. He has considered the application and the objections, and has also looked in great detail at the crime and disorder statistics in the local area, and I commend his report to you. In relation to the residential and resident association objections, you will see that alongside all of the other documents that we have presented to you, we have prepared specific representations, a specific document dealing with those concerns, and that can be found at pages 12 to 19 of your supplemental agenda. One theme that runs through all of the objections is a concern about planning. Councillors, respectfully, we're here to determine a premises licence application. This is not a planning committee, and is not the appropriate forum to raise those matters, or rather to raise those matters again. You're well versed in what is and is not relevant, and I don't intend to say any more on that particular point. I hope that I've done this excellent application justice, not just in the words that I've presented this evening, but also the paperwork that you have before you that hopefully you've had a chance to peruse. The submissions give a great deal more detail than I can in the time available to me, and they focus in on how things will work. We hope, should you be minded to grant this application. And with that, I revert to my question from the outset, which is, why wouldn't you grant this application? Councillors, unless I can assist any further, those are our submissions, and I invite you to grant this application as an exception to your policy, and I'm more than happy to deal with any questions you may have, or to invite the appropriate member of my team to respond. Thank you.
Chair, can I just remind you that one of the documents that was submitted recently this morning is a list of conditions from the licensing service. So I wondered whether or not Mr. Efford has had a chance to look at that list and whether or not he agrees with that.
Thank you,
They
Amanda.
were conditions. They were conditions from a resident, not from the licensing service.
That's correct. They're not from the licensing service.
So they're not agreed then? Yeah, that's the point we're making.
No, they're not agreed.
Can I just ask one point of clarification? So this application is in the name of the business rather than in the name of an individual?
Yes, correct. It's in the name of the company.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions or clarifications? Then we'll obviously move on to a discussion, but just points of clarification. Councillor Moema? You're muted.
I appreciate your points around how we are not here to go over what was decided at planning, but given that we are not part of planning, I wanted to get some clarification about what you were granted there for this space in terms of the use, particularly of the basement, but that might come up later. So, but I think that's primarily to the two development consultants that are on the call.
I'm afraid I don't have the planning permission in front of me. The planning use for the premises is a hotel. We are content with the planning status that it has, and that everything in line with this application is in line with the planning permission. It's also fair to add that the planning team of Hackney Council are statutory consultees to this application and have raised no objection, nor have they submitted any informative in relation to the planning status of the building.
But just for my own benefit, because obviously I'm not party to that, I'm part of this committee, particularly I think it was Laura and Andrew that you said might be able to help. Are they the right people on the call that might be able to answer that?
It will be either Laura or Chris. Laura, Chris, is there anything else you can add in terms of what the planning permission states in relation to this application?
So yeah, the planning approval was for hotel use for 124 bedrooms with ancillary restaurant use in the ground floor as well, and hotel lobby and retail space on the ground floor.
Thank you.
So is the microbrewery as an addition, is that correct?
That's ancillary to the overall planning status of the premises. We are absolutely comfortable that our planning permission covers everything we are asking for here this evening.
Councillor Gordon, I'd wonder, I have a couple of other things, but I don't know if they will come up later on in the wider discussion. I might hold off until then.
I think it might be helpful just to ask the main questions now, and then we can pick points up later. So obviously being mindful of time. So
Okay, sure. So I have another question around so you'd said that you didn't agree to the suggested conditions around the use of the areas which are effectively the drinking spaces. I think my question was around within the agenda pack. There are a couple of residents who've asked what the capacity you had proposed for those spaces is, and there wasn't an answer. And I'm just wondering, well, what is the answer to that? How many people are expected in these spaces, given it's a 24-hour?
Councillor, capacities are generally speaking determined by fire risk assessments. The fire risk assessment that we have had prepared for this premises indicates a maximum capacity, not including staff, of 120 people on the ground floor and 60 people in the basement.
So potentially that could be 180 people at any time.
That's the capacity of people that can be safely evacuated from the premises. As I mentioned, these are down to fire risk assessments. The premises license holder, should you be minded to grant them a license, will indeed look at how many people and how many covers they require in the premises. But if you were thinking along the lines of a capacity condition, it would need to be in line with the fire risk assessment. And those figures are 120 ground floor, 80 basement.
And is that something that is presented in any of your papers?
No, it's not. Those are the figures from our fire risk assessment. We haven't submitted the entire fire risk assessment. It's an incredibly long and complicated and large document with lots of facts and figures in it. Simply speaking, given the amount of time available, and we know that councillors are very busy people, we took the view that it would not be sensible to submit that to you and increase the paperwork burden upon you.
No, I take your point. However, the bit where it asks for capacity is one of the things that we will think about at this committee. It is literally a tick box, and it was just a bit unfortunate that the residents in the agenda pack did ask what it was. It seems quite a reasonable question, and that hasn't. So just to kind of pin down what's your operating capacity. So it's 180 for you.
On the ground floor and basement, if you wanted the capacity figures for the hotel as a whole, that's extremely.
With the bar area, I think that's
120 and 80, 120 and 60.
Okay. So can I continue?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about if we can look at the plans. You talk about so the residents have suggested a number of people that could be outside smoking at any one time, and obviously we're working at the numbers to be determined from your end. But the actual plans, I guess we're wondering where on page 33 and 33 and 34, the basement and the ground floor. Just if you could talk us through the logistics of how the space works, and then more, just as a clarification, X number of people smoking, where would that happen? Because obviously there are issues around accumulation of people on Kingsland Road, and what's your approach to dispersal? Because I know you've got a courtyard, but I don't quite understand how that would work. Are people smoking in your courtyard versus on the street? How many? Those sorts of things.
Okay. First, I'm going to deal with the courtyard first of all, if I may. The courtyard is covered. It has a roof on it, and you can see that roof at page 34 of your agenda papers. It's just beneath the sort of elongated oval-shaped seated bar counter. The entrance to the hotel is located at the top left of page 34, and the area that is accessible by guests as well as members of the public encompasses the top right-hand corner of that plan. And on the basement level on page 33, you'll see that underneath where that roof is, you have the courtyard restaurant downstairs in the basement. And the area that's accessible to the public basement level is much smaller. It's only really the courtyard restaurant and the male and female toilets at the basement level that is accessible to members of the public. In relation to smoking, we have submitted a plan that discloses where the smoking area is, and you'll find that at page 97 of your agenda papers.
Hang on a second, I'm just searching it.
We're talking about the supplementary bundle.
Yes, the supplementary bundle, Councillor.
So how many people will be outside?
Well, Councillor, smoking is not a licensable activity, and it's very difficult for us to give you an exact figure of how many people are going to be outside smoking at any one time. Usually, if you are minded to look at a capacity figure for a smoking area, then you would be looking at roughly 10 to 20% of the capacity of the food and beverage area for a smoking area. But people can smoke wherever they like. We will have designated smoking areas where we will encourage people to smoke, but that does not mean that they will be corralled or that they cannot go and smoke elsewhere.
It's quite common on this committee for us to condition numbers in respect of a smoking area, and also in respect conditions in respect of dispersal. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Councillor Moyam. I don't know whether you were maybe questions. I think it's very important that you and your clients understand, the background to us having a special policy area in Dalston. I mean, it's a densely populated residential area. There has been, considerable impact of the proliferation of licensed premises on the area. And I know you've addressed some of these points in your very helpful written submission. Things that could potentially reassure local residents are very close attention paid to the potential additional nuisance caused by people smoking outside, and reassurance about how guests are leaving the premises are going to be dispersed, as well as in relation to security. So it'd be really helpful to us, I think, if you could address those points.
Sure. So in terms of dispersal, the applicant will have a dispersal policy, and there is a copy of a draft dispersal policy at page 91 of the supplemental bundle. Dispersal policies are travelling documents. They will be, of course, updated as the premises falls into use. In terms of smoking, the smoking areas are covered by CCTV and will be monitored by staff to ensure that no problems are caused in the smoking areas, and that goes for both the staff smoking area and the customer smoking area. If you were to ask me for a cap for figures for the customer smoking area, I would suggest that would be around 15 people, but I would also suggest that you need to look at the timings for that, and if the concern is in the later hours of the evening, then that cap should only be imposed later in the evening.
So you're offering that potentially as a condition?
I am, yes.
People, thank you. So I don't know, I've got a couple of other questions. Councillor Odds, I don't know whether you want to come in.
Yes, please, I would. I was wondering, you referred in your submission to the other hotels that Eden run. I'd like you to give us some the examples of where and which they are. Also, in the papers we have, you give examples of types of bars and hotels, bars and restaurants in hotels that you consider similar. And the examples you've given are the London Hilton and the gosh, I forget the name of it, the one in the West End with a restaurant attached. Some very, what one call high class fancy hotels. Are you comparing your hotel to theirs?
Yes, absolutely we are.
And the other thing I'd like to ask about is, presumably your clients have researched the nature of the area, and this hotel will be on, although it's frontage on Kingston Road, it's on the corner of Sandringham Road. Now, Sandringham Road has quite a history as far as the police are concerned in terms of drug use and prostitution. What sort of impact do you think your hotel is likely to have, and what sort of policing, in inverted commas, efforts will you take within the hotel to prevent anything like that occurring within your hotel?
Thank you, Councillor. So I will deal with your question about Sandringham Road and the how we will police things. And then I will ask Matt Brierley, who is the Director of Openings, to come back to you on your question about our various other premises around the United Kingdom. The first thing to say is that a hotel is a 24-hour premises, councillor, and as such, it has a deterrent effect for the kinds of behaviours that you've identified in your question. The second is that the police, who are your experts on crime and disorder, are happy with this application. They are content with the conditions that have been offered. They are content with the operator. The operator operates extremely high-class premises. If it sees or hears of anything going on that is untoward, then it will not have any hesitation in reporting that to the authorities. There are conditions proposed within the operating schedule that deal with what the operator must do in the context of incidents and reporting of incidents and recording of incidents. This is an operator with the highest of standards, and yes, we do hold ourselves up there with some of those institutions identified in my notes. And on that note, I will hand over to Matt. Matt, would you please talk to the councillors about your other premises and where they sit within the UK? Thank you.
Unmute. Nope.
We can't hear you.
Matt,
Matt?
can you deal with the other locations?
Might need to log back in.
Yeah. Shall we move on? And if Matt gets back on, we can.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, thank you.
yeah, he's left. Okay. I've got a couple of other quick questions actually. When is it proposed that these premises will be open? Hello, Matt. I think you were just trying to. I think you're still on mute. Matt, I think you're still on mute. If you were talking.
No.
Oh, he's obviously having quite a few problems.
So, councillor, returning back to your question about when the premises are likely to open, the latest information I had was around the end of November. Of course, with all these things incorporating building works, there can often be some slippage. I would just briefly ask Laura whether that's correct. Is it still scheduled for towards the end of November?
Yeah, that's correct, Luke. Yeah, end of November.
Okay, so that's pretty soon. And I think the final question I had, you're also applying for a licence for film entertainment. I understand there have obviously been concerns from residents about that. Can you please clarify what that's for?
Concerns about films, councillor?
Well, it's opposite the established Rio Cinema. I think that was concern about residents. I think I understand it's for rooms, for residents' rooms, but I just want you to clarify that it's limited to that.
Yes, absolutely. We're not looking to go into competition with any sort of commercial cinema, and there is no commercial cinema within the premises. It is purely for hotel guests' bedrooms.
Okay, that's very helpful. Matt, are you able to come in now?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Lovely,
Yeah.
thank you.
I do apologise. I don't know what happened. It worked at the beginning and it stopped now. So
Yeah.
yeah, just to give you a bit of an overview, we've got the Lock brand in Edinburgh, London, Manchester, and we've got another 7 openings this year. We're very proud of our community-led properties. We work very closely with our neighbours. We partner with Indigenous brands, and we make sure that we really bring our neighbourhood to life and create something that we're very proud of. Our typical clientele that we've had through lockdown, especially we dealt with all the Nightingale Hospital colleagues, all the police force. So we are valued by the local authorities. We don't have any trouble with them. We don't promote drinking and late night parties. We're not that kind of establishment. Some of our typical guests are PwC, Deloitte. So these guests are high profile. They like staying in secure sites. And part of that is having these sort of indigenous brands within us that sort of gives you a bit of a flavour of what that part of London, for instance, Dalston's is all about. So absolutely, we don't want to upset any residents. We want to work with them. We want them to come in and enjoy our spaces too. And we'll be partnering with the local businesses. We're already looking at recruitment initiatives to get young people in vulnerable positions in the workforce within us. And we're very proud about what we do as a hotel group.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thanks very much. So why do you think people will be attracted to come to your hotel? I'm going to wind up this section.
Yeah, I think from our hotel, we're design-led. We very much put our own mark on the property, and we celebrate our location. So we want people to go on a tour. We're going to do local neighbourhood what's on guides and really celebrate what people bring to Dalston and what people can experience. It's a really exciting part of the outskirts of London, and we're really proud to have a property within there. We want to. We know it's somewhere it's going to grow and become a significant landmark around London. So it's only a matter of time before people really start extending into this area. But we're not about the commercial side. We're not a bedroom factory where it's in and out kind of situation. We do long stay, and our average length of stay is between 6 and 11 nights, which is far removed from the typical budget trains, which maybe encourage antisocial behaviour. We're not that type of business.
Will there be any possibility of your residents adding to the cumulative impact by going on tours of the bars of Dalston?
Oh no, I'm not referring to bar tours. I'm talking more cultural, sort of, you've got the local artists and residents around the corner. We want to celebrate independent fashion labels. The bar side of our business is not what we're here for. We want to make sure that we partner with indigenous brands, so we have great offerings for our residents to enjoy, but we certainly don't want to create sort of a springboard for a nighttime activity. That's not what we're about. We've got 124 bedrooms above us, so we can have anywhere between 180 to 200 guests in house. That our priority is making sure they have an experience that they want to come back to and enjoy. I guarantee it'll cost me a lot of money if I'm keeping people up and attracting late night revelers. That's not what we're about. And if you've seen from our application, I've worked quite closely with Luke to make sure that we reduce our hours accordingly. We don't want to be sitting there with some of the other venues that open till late. That's not what we're trying to attract. We want somewhere that people can locate, feel safe, secure, and really celebrate being part of the community and working alongside the neighbours.
Thanks very much. I can see that, sorry, Councillor Moima, did you want to come in quickly then? I can see that Amanda wants to say something, then we'll need to move on. That's probably what she's going to say.
Very briefly, thanks for that, Matty. Is it Matty? Matt?
I think it's because it's come up on our phone, but Matt's fine. Sorry.
Yes, it is.
So,
It's nearly like the cat incident.
I take your point that you are, obviously you're talking about the guests that you have staying with you as paying guests. I guess my questions are around the somewhere between 75 and 180 people in the drinking parts of your hotel, call them that for now. Obviously, there's lots of concern from neighbours about how the space is going to be run, and I'm still remain to be convinced about your dispersals and the location of how you're going to manage things like smoking, which other venues have, and just having a hard number on that. What consultation have you had with the local residents? I appreciate all the stuff you're talking about, new things, but for the existing community, what level of consultation have you had? Because I know in your agenda, in your pack that you've submitted, there are people supporting you, which is great. I'm just wondering, of the people that have raised concerns, what have you done to address them? Yeah.
I think you'll see from the objections that have been raised that we don't want sort of to appear as a business that doesn't want to work with them. We're not saying no to everything. We want to have a two-way conversation. It is a business at the end of the day. We've got commercial goals that we want to achieve, but they're not led by wet sales. We're not here to get people drunk, to get people intoxicated. I don't want crowds of people welcoming my guests that are coming here to enjoy Dalston, smoking outside of the front as an arrival experience. That's not what we're about. We don't want that. We're actually, if I could not do smoking and just reduce it, completely, we would. But we do have to have that facility. We do have we do have to have a facility. Listen, if we don't control it and put disposable extinguish points around and designate smoking, they're going to litter the street. We want people to have the facilities there when they want to participate in smoking, and we can control it. We'll have CCTV, we'll have security, we'll have a zero tolerance on drugs or any kind of antisocial behaviour. We don't want it. It's not in our interest.
And then just very quickly, in relation to the up to 180 people in your drinking areas who can be there, I'd be grateful to understand the policy around your guests can have access 24 hours.
Yeah.
The guests of the guests can have access 24 hours.
So bona fide residents, so people staying within the property, can have alcoholic drinks, like you would do if you're in your own house. We have a home from home experience, and like most hotels in the country.
But in the in the bundle that we presented, I just want to clarify that for myself. So if somebody is like you say, a bona fide resident of the hotels, paying to stay there for a few nights, they can have 24-hour access to all of these parts.
No.
Yes.
The actual license around what we're applying for is for the wet sales of the restaurant and bar. We will not keep those areas open later than that.
I'm not being difficult. I'm trying to be helpful. But
Councillor, perhaps if I can jump in on that. Licensable activities will be available to hotel residents and their guests throughout the day and night. For non-residents, i.e. members of the public, we are in accordance with Hackney's LP3 policy on hours, and we agreed that with the Metropolitan Police.
Fine, okay.
Just so this is quite an important part, which might explain why Luke and me might have different sort of objectives here. We partner with F&B. We don't run them ourselves. We ensure that we work with Indigenous business.
For the benefit of the public?
Pardon?
For the benefit of people watching on YouTube, what's F&B? Can you explain?
Food and beverage.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we ensure that then once these arrangements are in place, we can run a really successful and exciting brand within our under our umbrella. We're not here to have the F&B solely in. It's not our money in that return. We only take a percentage of it. It creates more jobs. It creates a much better experience that's local to the Dalston area. And it's not about a typical hotel where they'd have their own resident bar and it's all about their money going through the tills. My sole priority and our operation team is to create a really memorable experience. And our guests in the bedrooms, our neighbours, our communities, our focus. We need this licence to have the facilities like a hotel does. I'm not denying that, but we will control it. We have no desire whatsoever to have people drinking there till the early hours of the morning. We're dealing with people then spilling out onto the street. That's not what we're going for here. Yes, I appreciate you have to address that, but we have control measures in place. We're operating multiple sites across the country that have never had complaints. You can go and have a research into these. We do a really good job of looking after people, and we do a good job of respecting our community and neighbours.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, if colleagues got no further questions, I think we need to move on. So I'll now invite the responsible authorities, starting with the licensing authority representative, Mr. Tuitt, to make your representations. Over to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chair. My representation is contained within the report pack. Just because of page numbers, I've got it down as page 40 of the main report pack. So I'll keep it very brief. It's obviously a new site, a new premises license, a brand new site. However, there did previously used to be a Tesco Express at this site. Before that site was demolished some time ago now to make way for this new hotel development. I mentioned in my representation that this application seeks to replace a license that lapsed, but it didn't lapse. Tesco did actually surrender that license. So when they gave up that site, they surrendered the license and handed it back to us. So this is a new license application, obviously. But of course, the site is within the Dalston Special Policy Area, so LP10 applied has been referred to by Mr. Elford. As we can see, there is some concern from local residents, but the police obviously have reached agreement as well with the applicant. So it's mainly the policy consideration that my representation remains on. But I'll leave it there for now. So yeah, thank you.
To make a contribution?
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask, would you like to ask Mr. Tuitt what his view is about the location of the venue and the roads that surround that particular site? What impact will that have, etc.? Does he have anything to say about that?
Thank you.
Well, this site is, I guess it's prominently located within Kingsland High Street. Just thinking about what's around there, there are a number of premises around there, and that is what contributes to the cumulative impact in that area and the reason why we have a special policy area there. As we've heard, Sandringham Road is predominantly or very residential apart from the top end. But again, the applicant, I feel, has recognised this in their application, their amended application to a certain extent, with the limitation on the activities within the public parts of the premises. Obviously, we kind of see hotel residents kind of differently from the public parts of the premises. So they have limited the application to for the public parts, as I say, to the core hours within the council's policy. So that does go some way, I guess, to potentially addressing some of the concerns around cumulative impact. But it is an area where we do see some impacts as a result of the sheer numbers of premises in that area.
Can I ask you, David? So that's really helpful. In terms of the numbers of people and the up to 180, it sounds like, on the premises at any one time in the drinking parts, which how could any impact, how could mitigations around cumulative impact be made around that in terms of numbers and just managing people?
Well, I think there seems to be, well, just looking at the drawings,
do you mind referring to pages? Is that okay?
Yeah. So if I refer to the supplementary bundle.
Okay.
So I'm trying to work off an electronic copy here, and it's
is it the one that we just looked at, 97?
The page 97.
Yeah.
So the ground and basement levels.
Okay.
You can see from those drawings that there is a fairly considerable amount of seating in those drawings, or drawings or seating to be provided by the applicant. In relation to other ways to mitigate those impact, I think the hours would go some way to do that, but the provision of food also, the restaurant element to it also.
So can I just ask you then about the ground floor? That's page 34, I think. Is that right? Yeah. I might have got this wrong. So the bar area, is that all seated as is? I know there were concerns about vertical drinking in this premises.
It doesn't appear to be all seated. I'm sure Mr. Alford will be able to clarify that.
Would that be okay?
Thank you. Councillor, there is lots of seating provided throughout what you identify as the drinking areas, what we would call the restaurant, bar and lounge space. These are areas that are vital to this hotel. We've given you the capacities from the fire risk assessment. In actual fact, the number of covers would be less than that once you have all the furniture in. We haven't got the calculation for number of covers, but if you were looking to impose a capacity condition, we would suggest that is in line with the fire risk assessment.
Okay. Councillor Moema, have you got any other questions?
I think that's it.
Yeah. Councillor Odds, have you got any questions for the licensing for David? Yeah, I see that Amanda's got one. Amanda, do you want to come in?
Yes. Do you does Mr. Tuitt think that there's a need for a condition for having alcohol served with table service? Is there a need for that, or is, you know, can you advise as to whether or not there are any particular conditions that would be helpful to mitigate the impact?
I guess whether there's a need for that. I mean, that's a condition that's often imposed to limit the supply of alcohol, I guess, in some respects. So to limit the customers from being able to approach the bar directly. That is something that we often see, but I don't necessarily just want to make conditions up on the spot, really. So that's not something that the police have felt the need to attach, but it is by all means something that can be explored in the discussion phase.
Thank you. Amanda, you got any further? Councillor Oz, have you got any questions for David?
Not at this point, thank you.
What about the dispersal policy? Is there a dispersal policy, and has Mr. Tuitt seen that? Is he happy with that?
I've seen the dispersal policy. That looks fine to me. Quite something that tends to they tend to be organic, so they might change as the various things happen in the area. And
and the smoking area. Have you seen the smoking area?
Well, there isn't a specific smoking area, is there? But I would expect that any smoking would take place near to or around the main entrance, isn't it, on Kingston High Street? So if there is going to be a restriction on numbers, it's likely to be there, and it would need to have a start time and a cut-off time, isn't it? So, you know, after 11, let's say between 11 p.m. and 11 a.m., something like that, the number of smokers is restricted.
I think the applicants have offered 15. Would you comment on that? Do you think that's too high, or?
I don't think that's too high, but we would just need to make sure that it's there's a start time and a finish time for any condition like that where we're dealing with a 24-hour license.
Sorry. I've got a question first, Councillor Oz, and I'll bring you in. Then I'll bring you in. I'm not aware of any other big hotels in the Dalston area like this, and I think there may well be some similar establishments in Shoreditch. Have you got anything you can draw from your experience about the impact of these sort of premises on special policy areas?
Well, the only other hotel that I can think of is Premier Inn, which is in Dalston Lane. Which I guess
we don't want to be compared with them, thank you.
Yeah. With no disrespect to your client, Salford, or to Premier Inn itself, but I guess this is a different style of operation, different price point, and maybe even a different offer. I'm thinking of hotels within Shoreditch where we have a mixture, let's say, of hotels at all ends of the spectrum, but it does tend to be the public access and public parts of hotels which effectively operate as normal public premises. So that those are where we might tend to see issues.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oz, then Amanda, and then we'll try and wrap this bit up. Councillor Oz, I think you had a question.
Sorry, yeah. I just wanted to comment on the smoking areas. If we look at the supplementary bundle on page 97, there's a plan there which actually shows a green triangle and a red triangle. The green triangle on Kingston, on the frontage on Kingston Road, as a guest designated smoking area, and the red triangle on Sandringham Road as a staff designated smoking area. So there are designated smoking areas. I'd just like to know how far they are from the actual entrances to the hotel. And does the hotel have an entrance on Sandringham Road, or is that just the staff will have to walk round the corner?
I mean, that may
Yes.
be the applicant can assist with better. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. The main entrance to the hotel is on Kingsland Road. Staff are likely not to leave through the public areas, but more likely to leave through the staff exit to the rear of the hotel. Guest smoking is going to be located near to, but not so close as to cause difficulty for Matt and his team, to the front entrance to the premises. In terms of smoking areas, councillors, we are quite happy to work with the responsible authorities and local residents to place the smoking areas in such a way that they are sensitive to the needs of not just local residents, but our guests as well. We are not wedded to those locations. They are the locations that we have identified as being most suitable. But if someone was to say to us, we don't want your smoking area there, we would quite happily move it somewhere else. It needs to be somewhere that we are able to have control of and that we are able to supervise. It's no good trying to move it across the road or to a completely different place, because then it's out of our control. If you're asking us to supervise and control a smoking area and control a number of smokers, particularly later into the evening, it has to be an area which is within our compass of control.
Sorry, can I just, I don't express myself very clearly. What I wanted to clarify, certainly the guest designated smoking area appears to be set back from Kingston Road and actually on your premises rather than on the public highway, which to me seems quite an eminently suitable solution. Would the same apply to the staff designated smoking area?
Can you help with that?
Councillor, I'm struggling to understand what it is you mean.
Well, basically, smoking areas are not on the public highway. They're on your own premises. And therefore, they're not going to interfere with the flow of pedestrians or, you know.
No, they are on the public highway, councillor.
They are on the public highway.
They're outside the hotel on the public highway.
So the frontage of the hotel will actually be straight onto the pavement, not onto a courtyard of any sort.
Yes, yes, and that's clear from the plans.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think Amanda had a point to make. Then.
Yeah, my point was how will the local residents be impacted then by that smoking area? Are they going to be, are there local residents quite close to that smoking area?
Amanda, the nearest residents to the smoking area are our own residents, and therefore it's not in our interest to allow the smoking area to become an issue.
After that, who's the next residential neighbour? Where are they in relation to the plan on page 97?
I would suggest that the people next door to Argos.
I think this leads back really to, I think, to the point I think Councillor Moema made earlier about consultation with residents and ongoing consultation with residents if we were minded to grant this licence, which I think is something that we'd very much feel that is really important, certainly for a premise of this size and impact.
Councillor, there has been consultation with local residents throughout the planning process. The consultation period is built into licensing applications. We have received the objections from local residents. Unfortunately, Hackney have a policy of making those nondescript and redacting the names of the individuals who have objected, so that we don't even know who it is. We are a community-focused operation, and we are quite happy to meet with residents semi-regularly to get their thoughts on how the operation is going, and local residents will be. We hope that local residents will be our customers. So we feel that there's going to be a significant amount of engagement with local residents as part of this premises. We'll be supporting local residents, local businesses, and that's really all I can say, Councillor, in terms of consultation.
Will there be
Okay.
a point of contact where residents can, would be some kind of notification so that they can make representations if they need to?
Yes, one of the conditions that was submitted with the application and that has been there throughout, number 2, page 29, there'll be a direct telephone number, a direct line to the premises available for local residents to contact us. There is a point of contact.
Okay, thank you. Right, I think we can now move on to the other persons. I think we've got an objector on the line, C4.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello,
Yeah.
hi. Yes, I can hear
Hello.
you. Do you want to
Thank you very
present
much.
objections?
Thank you. The applicant had 13 minutes to present the case, and that was before all the questions. This is a rather large application. I will try and rattle through everything very briefly, if I may. Thus far, I've been really unimpressed with this application. Why wouldn't you want to grant this license? Well, because it will cause crime and nuisance. Just to correct Mr. Elford, this isn't Kingsland Road, this is Kingsland High Street. It's a very busy area, and this business wants to sell alcohol and entertainment. I noticed the emails of support. One of them is from the woman who wants to run the place, Catherine Guest, who's going to be the general manager, apparently. I'd say the elephant in the room, COVID-19 is a red herring. There are plenty of late night revelers already here at the moment, even with all the restrictions in place. I welcome the police's reduced hours, although this does make for a lot of confusion, and you could definitely do with more officer support. The 180 capacity, well, that's news at this hearing. It seems quite a lot of people. The idea that there will be 10-20% of that as in the smoking area, that's 18 to 36 people on the pavement, doesn't strike me as particularly helpful. And we don't want this the smoking area moved, we want the numbers reduced. And that, of course, that doesn't include the residents actually in the building, in the hotel ranges, or the staff members. There are other hotels that this company runs, but not with the bar, not certainly the one that Mr. Bamber saw, which was compared with a coffee bar. I've lived here for over 30 years, and I know a lot about this area, and they seem to be very much focused, these applicants, it's all about their business. Their sole priority apparently is making a memorable experience for their guests. I haven't heard very much about the licensing objectives. Madam Chair, a useful starting point to coin the applicant's phrase is actually the smoking area plan, which is number 4, which is being referred to page 97 of the supplementary bundle supplied by the applicant. This is useful because you can actually see what the planning permission was for, and that was for a retail premises on the ground floor, which the applicant has just completely overrided and decided to put in a destination cocktail bar, to quote their brochure, instead. Licensing policy 5 on planning status, of course, is relevant. So the ground floor retail unit has gone, and now we have a microbrewery and bar, and downstairs was going to be a co-working and cafe floor space, not a restaurant. First time that residents have been informed about the licensing activities, that the licensable activities that the applicant had planned, and this is the first time we've had any idea that this destination cocktail bar was going to be landing in our midst. This was a very large site. It is a very large site, which used to have a sizable open-air car park at the front, and developers have built on every square inch, and now expect their smokers from the unplanned parts of their development to clutter up and pollute the public realm on the spot where they uprooted a little tree. It's a very narrow pavement, and it's a very busy pedestrian highway on Kingston High Street. The numbers using and the impact of the smoking nuisance will be exacerbated by the uses that were not submitted as part of the planning application. Very deep, we have this destination cocktail bar and this restaurant, and I'm plagued by restaurants. They can be little more than booze-fueled snack bars. The primary purpose is to make money for the developers, and the last thing we need here in this area is another quote from their brochure, Vibrant Hub, with an activities and events program. The area is already too vibrant at night. This is why this is a special policy area. The developers claim they have a community focus. Well, if they had respected the retail planning space consent that they themselves obtained, I'd have more faith in their community focus. Chair, this is the track method of the management of these premises. They say one thing to a council subcommittee and then do another. How much confidence can you have in these developers who change their plans and don't give the people who will be most effective to say on those plans and is content about that? The core hours are for the alcohol and entertainment licenses. I mean, no one's actually said what they want a live music and recorded music license for. You don't need a license for background music. I'm concerned about things like weddings with lots of guests and so forth. And from what I've read of the application, it looks like they're going to have films in the downstairs lounge. I'm willing to be corrected on that, but that's how it reads. I'll point you to 2.17 in the licensing policy about taking an approach to licensing hours that balances the needs of the licensed trade whilst protecting residential amenity in order to promote the licensing objectives. And I also want to point out the confusing wording that you have in this application. You have residents, non-residents, guests, which is used for both residents and non-residents, and then you have patrons, which is suggested condition 14. It's impossible to enforce the differential hours that they have between guests and their guests. I don't see how that's going to work. This can be easily abused both by guests and their guests, and of course the applicant might not be so minded to actually do anything about that. When is this destination cocktail bar going to close? As far as I can see, it's going to be open 24/7. There doesn't seem to be any restriction at all on that, and the hotel residents and their guests can come and go whenever they please and disperse whenever they want. And there seems to be no limit to the amount of guests, that's guests of the guests, that will be turning up and dispersing. This is a poor dispersal policy. It says that the premises will not operate a hard stop. So what we can have is dribs and drabs of people exiting at all hours of the night. And I haven't seen any kind of risk assessment about their entertainment and alcohol. And the emphasis is on not disturbing their guests rather than not on disturbing local residents. The cumulative impact policy is enforced, and there for a reason. The applicant invites you to doubt your own policy, and it would seem the applicant doubts that compliance with the policy and other regulations such as planning is necessary. The ex-police officer for hire, who doesn't seem to know the immediate vicinity is a high crime area, particularly for theft of visitors at night and for violent crime, and hasn't compared like with like. There's no coffee shop or co-working space at the here. He's looking at this destination cocktail bar. A peaceful place for hotel residents, but not for local residents. I note the additional representations made from people who live nowhere near this development. As for their proposed conditions, well, it's not extensive. It's the condition 10 seems completely useless, ancillary to use as a hotel. I'm wondering what on earth how that would be enforced. The nuisance conditions have no utility, and it's contrary to the Section 182 guidance. They're not enforceable by licensing. That's 22 and 23, and notices of no use either. The dispersal and security policy are fairly inadequate. There's no quality check on the dispersal policy. They'll say they will, enhance it, but there's no obligation to do that. And what hotel needs SIA bouncers? No. I've made some suggested conditions. I think they're sensible. I think they would very much help. I think one of the real problems is we have the issue of guests and their guests coming in at all hours of the night and being able to drink alcohol in the public areas, and that doesn't seem to be right to me. It seems coaching horses through both the core hours and the cumulative impact policy. And I would like to know, the things like minimum hire of a room, well, for the prostitution that was mentioned earlier, I think that's important. The function rooms not to be hired out. Maximum capacity, I think, is very important. I think the 180 is far too big. Smoking area, and a really important one for me would be deliveries made to the premises. I've noticed they talking about an ad hoc arrangements of ad hoc deliveries. No conditioning about that at all. Certainly don't want that going on through the night and the early hours of the morning. And I think all the conditions about supply of alcohol, no standing, table service, ancillary to a substantial table meal. If I could direct you and Mr. Chewett to 2.19 in the licensing policy, it's a fairly standard condition. And also drinking on the street, and of course the recorded music, which is another aspect of this. The lobby doors should be kept closed. No dancing, no disc jockeys, no promoters. And what is this recorded music license for? Thank you, Angie. I hope that I've rattled through that very quickly, and I hope that's of help to you.
Thank you very much. I can see I think there's another member of the public, I'm afraid I don't know your name, signalling. I'm going to have to take advice on this. I'm not sure whether you put in an objection or notified that you're going to speak.
You're on mute.
You're on mute, yeah. I think you're still on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Right. I'm Ursula Hughes. I'm Secretary of the Local Residents Association. We did put in an objection and I was invited to speak at this meeting, so I'm surprised.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll just confirm that with the officer, Ms. Hughes. I do apologise. You're just not on my chair's briefing, so just a second. I just want to confirm it with the officer. Can I have, I don't know whether the officers can confirm that with me. I just want to...
Suva?
Yes. Mr. Ursula, she has submitted a representation, which is C2.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Ms. Hughes, do you want to go ahead?
It's Professor Hughes, actually.
I do apologise, yeah.
Right. I'm, as I said, Secretary of the Rio Cross Residents Association. I live, if I were to turn my camera slightly, the Rio Cinema is outside the window. I live directly on the other side of, in John Campbell Road, on the other side of the high street from these premises. And this is an area which, as I'm sure the police and lots of other people can attest, has for the last 10 years been increasingly a public space where very large numbers of people, mostly young people, gather late at night and are a major source of nuisance. And this is, of course, why we have the Dalston Spa in this area. That is, if you like, the epicenter of all the antisocial behaviour associated with the local nighttime economy. The people have always been compressed into a very small space. That space has now halved because of the loss of the car park that used to be outside the old Tesco, which this premises has replaced. So we have even more people concentrated in an even smaller space with very narrow pavements. The pavements indeed are so narrow that people like myself who are disabled are scared to walk along them at night because we get pushed off into the path of the oncoming traffic. So you've got a very, very dense crowd of people on the streets causing antisocial behaviour and associated with a lot of crime, historic crime. I heard Mr. Elford say at the beginning that because of the pandemic, this is going to stop. I have to tell you that although the lockdown is only just starting to lift in Dalston, we have already had a lot of commotion on the streets outside my house over the last 2 weeks, including incidents where police have had to be called, with people yelling and shouting and fighting. And, you know, there is no way that the pandemic is going to magic away the effects of very large numbers of people on the streets here locally. So I'm speaking in my capacity here as a representative of local residents, and I'd also like to echo the point that the residents you seem to have rustled up seem to be people who work for your hotel, or at least one of them does. So I'm not quite sure how representative a sample they are. But also wearing my other hat, in my job involves an awful lot of international travel, and I actually stay in a lot of apartment hotels. This is, as I take it from what was he called, Matty was saying, that this is actually an apart hotel where people come and stay for up to a week at a time, rather than just a one-night business hotels. And I've stayed in a lot of these hotels in Paris, in Berlin, in Amsterdam, in New York, and so on. And what I have observed in these places makes me extremely alarmed, because they, you've got people staying or away from their natural habitat, so to speak, staying for a week in a place that's got, in this case, it's got
Chair,
a...
this seems very much above and beyond the representation.
I make my point, please. We listen to you. They attract bored sexual predators, basically. We have on our streets a very large number of very vulnerable young women. When the
Sorry, Chair. This is way above and beyond what was submitted.
At around 2 a.m., so you've got very young women on the street, and if somebody comes up to them and says, "Oh, hey, you can come into our cocktail bar, you can be my guest, you can drink round the clock," and then lure them into their hotel rooms, this is a real risk to vulnerable young people. I have observed it myself in other apartment hotels. We know that there's a lot of that kind of crime already goes on in Dalston, and I want to add that as an extra concern to the residents' existing concerns about the cumulative impact of antisocial behaviour, and also about just literally the physical risks due to having our streets overcrowded. I'll finish now, thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Elford, and thanks for your thanks, Professor Hughes, for your contribution. Thanks, Mr. Elford. I mean, obviously, as a licensing committee, we'll give appropriate weight to all contributions. But I mean, I would say that you know, I do think most of what was said is relevant to the licensing. To the licensing conditions. So I think that's anyway. I think we're now going to move on to whether members have got any questions for the two members of the public, and then we'll move on to the discussion. But maybe we just keep these questions brief. Councillor Rodds.
Sorry, I just had to unmute myself. Yeah, I would actually like to ask the person who is on the phone who made his representations if he actually looked at page 18 of the agenda, where it says about films. Please give further details here. The showing of films to hotel residents and their guests in hotel bedrooms only. And on page 19, the performance of live music within the ground floor of the premises only. So basically, this is what hotel would provide. I presume I doubt if the live music would be a Reading festival or anything of that sort. I think the police would soon come down quite heavily on anything like that, even if it were possible.
Well, I'll take it. I mean, what I've got here is I've got an awful lot of last-minute disclosures in 2 jumbled up emails. If there's no films on the ground floor, that's great. Films aren't a particular concern for me. So recorded music certainly is on the ground floor. Quite why they need recorded music on the ground floor, I don't know. After all, you don't need a license for background music, so one presumes this is going to be louder than background music, above the levels of ordinary conversation. So what's that doing on the ground floor? I don't know. I have no idea about that. I don't know whether you've seen anything about that, Councillor, because I haven't.
I can see that Mr. Alford's got his hand up. I think we're just asking very brief questions to the residents, then we'll move on to discussion, but I will remember that point about recorded music. Councillor Emma?
I had in the discussion perhaps to clarify the point that, sorry to call you C4, but the point that I raised before about patrons, the different categories of people that will be using the ground floor and the basement space, and just what that means for kind of movement across the space. In terms of, so you've kind of talked quite forcefully about what would be the 180 according to the risk assessment is too many. What would be reason? This is a question to both of you. What would be considered a reasonable number of people in a space like this across the 2 floors?
Sorry, is that a question for me, Councillor?
Yes, for you first, and then for Professor Hughes.
Well, I think anything above 100 is too much. I certainly don't think 180 is appropriate. More of my concern is, when is this dispersal going to happen? If this bar is open 24 hours a day, then I am concerned about that. I'm concerned that the fact that they're not going to have a dispersal at a reasonable hour, they're going to have a dispersal in dribs and drabs throughout the night. That's much more of a concern to me than the absolute numbers, but I don't think a large capacity would be helpful either. Certainly 180 is a very large capacity, additional capacity, adding to the cumulative impact in the area at the hours that have been suggested. I don't see how this is also enforceable between residents and non-residents, guests and their guests. I don't see how that is actually practically going to work, and that's very concerning.
Okay, thank you.
Professor Hughes, do you want to also comment on that? You don't have to.
Well, my concern is not so much about the numbers. Clearly, numbers are always matter, especially when you're talking about a cumulative impact situation. But I suppose my concerns are more about how the whole situation is going to be managed, and if you like, policed with a small p. What sort of controls are there going to be about who can be brought in as a guest into the bar area, and even more so about who can then be brought in as a guest to the bedroom of the person concerned. It seems to me there need to be some very clear sort of filters that are well managed by well-trained staff to ensure that vulnerable people are not put at risk in this situation.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor Odds, have you got a quick question?
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the actual licensing hours, which were just referred to. It's quite clear that the application for the bar to stay open at all times is purely for hotel guests, hotel residents only. It quite clearly states that. I think the problem is, as Professor Hughes just mentioned, is how to delineate between those who are residents of the hotel and those who have come in from outside.
I don't believe that's right, Mr. Councillor. I believe it's only hotel guests and their guests, i.e. non-residents who are invited in.
Chair, can you?
Yeah. Okay. I think unless anyone's got any further questions to the applicants, I think we'll now move on to the discussion stage. And I appreciate there's probably a number of points the applicants do want to come back on. Amanda, do you want to just say something first?
Yes, I just wanted to ask if you wanted to raise anything about noise limiting. How do they control noise and things like that? I don't know if they've touched on that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. I think that's directed towards the resident objectors. I don't know whether anyone of you wants to comment on that.
Oh, well, Councillor, I don't know whether Professor Hughes has seen the conditions that I've circulated or has been circulated. I would suggest that the conditions there would be very helpful for reducing the levels of noise, both outside and afterwards, during a dispersal phase. But the issue remains about dispersal of it going on in dribs and drabs throughout the night. There seems to be no limit on the amount of people who can be invited into this premises 24 hours a day for the purposes of drinking. If there is a stop on this bar, I've not seen it, but it seems to me that this bar is going to be open 24/7, or could be open 24/7, according to this application. And this concerns me very much. And also with the recorded music and the live music, that obviously always adds to any nuisance caused, because people are desensitized to noise and they are uninhibited after drinking alcohol. So this is a great concern to me.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll now move on to the discussion. And I will give the applicants, their representatives, first an opportunity to respond to those points made by the resident objectors. I think particularly want to focus on numbers of people, the hours in respect of different categories of people in the hotel, the control in relation to who is going into rooms, and the control in relation to dispersal of the guests as opposed to the residents. The impact of the hotel being so close to the road. I think noise nuisance has been raised as well, and also obviously again the resident objectors have raised the cumulative impact. So I don't know whether you want to sort of address those points with any additional points. I appreciate that you've been wanting to for a while. Thank you.
So yes, just dealing with categories of persons, first of all. There are effectively, can C4 mute out, please? Sorry, I'm getting feedback at my end. Dealing with categories of persons, you have hotel residents, any guests of those residents, so people staying in the rooms with them, and then you have members of the public. Those are the three categories of people. If they've been expressed differently as patrons or customers or whatever, then that's in the context of the conditions. But those are the three categories of people we're talking about. There was some discussion about noise. I'd just like to point everyone to condition 11 at page 30, where there is a noise limiter proposed by the applicant. And also a condition that doors and windows will be kept closed after 2300 and during regulated entertainment. I've already said, and I was criticised for it, that if we operate in such a way as to disturb local residents, we will have by that point disturbed our own residents, which is not good business for a hotel. How will you distinguish between residents and members of the public? Well, it's key card access up to areas of the hotel that are accessible by hotel residents and their guests. How is that managed? Well, the reception is staffed 24 hours a day. How do we ensure that people who shouldn't be going up to the hotel rooms don't go up to the hotel rooms? We ensure that through staffing, and we ensure that through staff training, and we employ exceptionally high quality staff. And this is an experienced operator with hotels around the country. Never have any of those problems highlighted by Professor Hughes presented themselves in our hotels. And frankly, we don't expect that they ever will do. Safeguarding training is part of the suite of training that is provided to our staff. And that teaches them to look out for signs of people being manipulated, particularly people who are underage. Chair, was that everything, or is there anything else? Oh yes, deliveries. The premises has internal servicing through the rear of the premises, whereby deliveries and collections are brought into the premises via the rear, and that allows the hotel to be serviced internally, so there should be no disturbance to local residents from those. And I think that's it. There seems to be lots being made of the loss of a car park where people used to congregate. Well, surely the people that congregated in the car park were the people that were causing the issues for the local residents. We strongly believe that this hotel will be a positive benefit to the area. The hotel itself will be a resident and will treat the local area as if it was a resident. And that includes taking pride in the local area and looking after it. And in terms of cumulative impact, Chair, the only thing I would do is recommend to your particular reading my note on cumulative impact.
Can I, Chair? Just a general question. You've raised lots of points in your submission. Where are they in the publicly available bundle? So the stuff about noise.
Where are they in the bundle?
Yeah.
They're throughout the bundle. Page 30 regarding the noise limiter.
No, in the, not the supplementary information, the Park Council published stuff that's on the website. This.
That's, yeah, page 30.
Yeah, he was reading verbatim from page 30.
Yeah. It is on page 30, it's point 11.
Councillors, all of the papers are
Yeah.
publicly available.
Yeah,
both
that's it.
the agenda and the supplementary agenda.
Yeah.
There are no hidden documents that you don't have.
I mean, I'm simply asking for clarification. I'm not suggesting there are. There's no need for that. Sorry. Because we are working across 120 pages of documents in a virtual situation, so I'm simply asking for clarification.
And, you know, and as the residents pointed out, these were only served this morning. So it's, you know, it has been a considerable challenge. I think the councillors on this committee have been working during the day as well. So, you know, again.
Chair, can I ask, sorry to interrupt, Chair, can I ask, these documents were sent to the council over a week ago.
I can't comment on that, so.
We received them today.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's been suggested that a reasonable capacity by the residents for this area would be 100 people. I don't know whether you want to comment on that.
Chair, I think that a reasonable capacity for the area needs to follow the fire risk assessment, which is 120 on the ground floor and 60 in the basement. If you were looking to me to commit to figures for the specific areas beneath that, I would need to just quickly turn off and take instructions from those instructing me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd just subject to what my colleagues think. I think that would be helpful if you could.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bear with me.
Madam Chair, can we say anything at this point?
Not while the other people are not present in the meeting. Everything needs to be said in public.
Okay.
Chair, would this be an appropriate moment to have perhaps a break for 5 minutes?
Yes, I do. I think so. That's a good idea. Thanks very much.
If we could formally adjourn then for 5 minutes and return, say, at about 8:45.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's 8:45 now. I think we should. I think everyone's here. Can people turn their cameras on?
If we can reconvene, thank you, Chair.
So we're just waiting for Councillor Moema.
Okay, back on.
Oh yeah. Okay, I think everyone's here. Yes, we adjourned so that you could take instructions in relation to the 100 capacity point. Thank you.
Yes, we're happy to offer 120 on the ground floor and 80 in the basement as a capacity condition.
Yeah, I don't think that's actually what I was asking. I'm sorry if it wasn't clear. I think that's what you submitted as the fire risk assessment. So I don't think there's any change in that. I think what we were suggesting was that that was too high, and that capacity of less than that for the whole premises, 100 might be more appropriate. I don't know whether that's something whether your conversation thought there could be any movement on.
No, sorry. A capacity of 100 people is not acceptable, unfortunately. The fire risk assessment deals with the capacity of the premises. We anticipate that it will be less than 120 and 60, but if a condition is going to be attached to the licence, those are the figures we would like, please.
I don't know whether you want to think about that a bit more. I mean, it's something that we quite often will condition on this committee in terms of capacity. I don't know what my colleagues think. Whether there is any.
Chair, I agree with that point. I was just going to say, and this is trying to be helpful, that because we don't have clarity on whether people are seated or you have table service or it's vertical drinking in the ground floor, that does make that it'd be helpful to get an idea of where you are in terms of what is a reasonable number of people. The fire risk assessment, I haven't seen it. I'm taking everything that's said here as read, but I would assume that that's kind of maximum capacity if everybody's standing, for example. I don't know. So.
No, the fire risk assessment is the number of people that can be safely evacuated, and that takes into account all of the tables and chairs and other blockages in the premises. The premises is laid out to tables and chairs, both in the restaurant and in the bar lounge. It sounds as if you're asking me to accept a lower number of persons. We are happy with the figures from the fire risk assessment. That is what we're asking for. Beneath that, it's going to impinge upon our business. Look, if it was felt helpful, we could probably reduce that to 100 on the ground floor and 50 downstairs. But that's really taking a chunk out of our available trade.
So that's a reduction of 30 people altogether in the two bar areas. Okay. Councillor Rodds, I don't know whether you've got any comments you want to make at this stage?
Yeah, I do. Couple of points of clarification. When I spoke earlier and Mr. Elford replied about the differentiation between hotel guests, hotel residents, their guests and members of the public. I obviously was not referring to the parts of the hotel, the actual hotel rooms, which are access card controlled. I was thinking more in terms of the lounge bar area, the downstairs restaurant, and the microbrewery, which will, from the look of the license, will be open to hotel residents 24/7, but obviously to members of the public will only be open during core licensing hours. And there has to be a differentiate somehow, some way of the staff knowing who is a resident and who is a member of the public without them having to wear badges. I would suggest that from what you said about the quality of the staff you employ, that would rely on the staff actually knowing who's who. The other couple of points, one is just an information point, which is not directly relevant to licensing, but just confused me. The license application actually refers to the hotel as Dalston Lock, whereas in the list of hotel in your supplementary documentation, I realised today, having read through it earlier, I saw what I thought was another hotel, but now I realise it's the same hotel that's referred to as Kingsland Lock. What is the hotel actually going to be called? Is it Dalston Lock or Kingsland Lock? Because I think legally that would affect the application. And the third point is, could you let us know? You have another hotel, Lehman Lock, in Lehman Street. Is that actually in the City of London or is it in Hackney?
Thank you, Councillor. Just in relation to the name of the hotel, I'll ask Matt to come in on that. Lehman Lock is actually in Tower Hamlets,
Okay.
not the City of London. In terms of the name of the hotel, Matt, do you want to just confirm Dalston Lock?
The property name will be Kingsland Lock, as it will be referred to on the high street.
That's the name of the hotel, Kingsland Lock. It's been...
Which case, sorry, just to clear that, to finish that point off, can I ask our legal advisor if that has any relevance in terms of the application? Because in the application, it's referred to as Dalston Lock.
No, because I don't think it has an issue because it's named after the street, isn't it? Or a street in that area. Have I got that wrong or right?
A premises license attaches to the premises. So actually the important thing is the address, which is 130 Kingsland High Street.
Yes, I think he's concerned about the area in which the actual premises is located. So he's saying that if it's Kingsland,
No. All I'm saying is because the application actually refers to it as Dalston Lock and it will be called Kingsland Lock, the fact is the license, as you said, attaches to the premises. So I'm just trying to clear up the fact the fact that the license application actually says Dalston Lock, but it actually gives the correct address.
David or Suba, are you able to clarify whether or not this is Kingsland or Dalston Lock?
Yeah, I would just say it's not really important. The address is the main thing. The address at Kingsland High Street and the drawing that's attached to it, if you're minded to mark, that's all we need.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am grateful for your reassurance that you do have a safeguarding policy in place, going back to an earlier part of the discussion. Has that been shared with us?
No, it hasn't.
Okay. I think there may be some reassurance if it was, but I am grateful for your reassurances that you do have a safeguarding policy in place. If we were minded to grant this license, obviously your business and your client's business and the rest of the community, including the residents who've given up their time this evening to attend this hearing, will be neighbours on an ongoing basis. Would you be prepared to meet with them or other representatives on a regular basis, certainly in the early stages, if we were minded to grant this licence? And yes. How would you make sure that those meetings take place? I know that you've said give a contact number and a telephone number, I mean, email address, lots of different ways of being able to be in contact, I think would be extremely helpful.
Yes, we're more than happy to meet with local residents. May I suggest that after the hearing is concluded, Mr. Brierley's details are passed on to the local residents, and then they can set up meetings as necessary to discuss the hotel. If it was felt that a condition was necessary to promote the licensing objectives, and I'm not sure it is appropriate or proportionate in these circumstances, then a condition that resident meetings take place once per quarter would be acceptable, I suppose, to us. The danger with resident meetings is, I have found, is that they are advertised, nobody attends, and then they stop happening because there is a lack of attendance, and then you will have the hoteler asking to have that condition removed from its premises license for want of attendance. I would much rather it was left organic and the details were exchanged between the concerned residents and the hotel, and they are left to meet up outside of the Licensing Act and outside the premises license.
Okay, has anyone got any further points to make in the discussion? Amanda?
I just wanted to clarify with Mr. Jewett, does he need to have the smoking area outlined on the plan, or it's not necessary?
I don't think it's necessary. I think when you look at the additional submission, I think Councillor Odds has picked up on it actually, because that, and Mr. Izzo also, that plan appears to relate to the previous plan where the unit on the ground floor was a retail unit. So as these developments get built out, they do tend to change the layout from time to time. So I can see that the entrance isn't where it had always planned to be. So I think, as I said before, I would expect that smokers to or customers or residents, hotel residents, etc., smoking would likely gravitate towards the main entrance. So I don't necessarily think it has to be marked out specifically.
If it helps, if the license is granted, we are more than happy to send in a revised plan of the ground floor showing those smoking areas that can be appended to the license. That's not a problem.
Chair, can I make a suggestion to hopefully address, I think, the substantive point that Professor Hughes raised about safeguarding and of young people, particularly women, but obviously not exclusively. The council has is signed up to a scheme called Ask Angela, and that kind of seeks to ensure that premises holders and people working of an evening in a licensed premise are able to provide support to people that might, if you like, fall into difficulty on, I don't know, a difficult date or something like that. And just wanted reassurance that the applicant, if they were granted a license, would sign up to that and other schemes to support local people if they are local users of the premises.
Yes, absolutely. Those are very standard things and form part of our safeguarding procedures. We'd be more than happy to be part of the Ask Angela scheme and to use it within our premises as necessary. As I said previously, we've not had a single incident of this happening at any of our properties around the UK, and we see absolutely no reason why that would be any different at this hotel. But of course, it is right to take precautions. We'd be happy to be part of the scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Mohammed. That's really helpful. Are there any other further points, or shall we move on to the summing up?
Hang on, excuse me. We've had a discussion phase and we've not had any chance to make any points at all. Residents?
That's why I'm giving you the opportunity now. Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, please, if I may.
Yeah, I apologise. It is a little bit difficult when people are on the phone, but thank you for intervening. So,
thank you very much, Madam Chair. First of all, the conditions do not go far enough at all. There are a number of issues I've raised about the nuisance, particularly, which need to be addressed. The elephant in the room, which Mr. Elford has avoided addressing, is he hasn't denied the fact that residents can invite as many non-residents into the bar as they like, 24/7, and that they can disperse outside of this premises throughout the early hours. That's in the license. It's not been denied, and I've not seen anything to mitigate that. I'm not comforted at all by anything that's been said, or the dismissal policy, which says there's not going to be a hard stop. I would like there to be a hard stop and for this bar to close, according to the core hours and according to the cumulative impact policy. As for the deliveries, which Mr. Elford talks about, well, if he looks in his own waste policy bump, which is number 13, you can see it says front of house entrance. This will be used for deliveries, including fresh produce, etc., on an ad hoc basis. So I would definitely like that to be conditioned. That's something that LBH normally conditions in licenses, a prohibition on deliveries during the night time, early hours of the morning, so between something like 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night and 9 o'clock in the morning, at the front of house, that is, particularly. The fire risk assessment is no criteria for promoting the licensing objectives. It's amazing that after that delay, that adjournment, the applicant came back with actually increased the capacity by 20 and eventually has reduced it, I think, by about 10. It doesn't seem to be particularly serious obviously does not want to reduce the capacity of this vertical drinking establishment. The license is all that's important here. I don't want a meeting. I don't want anything to do with running this premises or having ongoing discussions. There are dozens of licensed premises around here, and I don't want to be involved in the management of any of them. I expect the management to do a proper job, and I expect a proper license that's going to protect me, a residential amenity according to the licensing policy. And it's very important that it takes place. This is a very substantial development. It's a very complicated license. You should have had more officer support. There needs to be a time when this bar closes, and I'm concerned about things like weddings. You could have a wedding here, you could have hundreds of guests throughout the night. There's no prohibition, there's nothing to stop any of this. And there are scant protections. I hear Mr. Chewett, yeah, people change the layout, but this isn't a change of layout. This is a destination cocktail bar which is only being disclosed to us at the very last minute. There's nothing about this in planning, and there was nothing about this in the application. It's only got to us in a brochure I received on Friday. So it's not hardly fair to expect us to know what's happening with this. And I'm very concerned that the conditions that are in place don't go far enough. And I would ask you very much to consider the conditions I've suggested, which are very sensible and would protect and promote the licensing objectives.
Thank you. Professor Howes, have you got anything else to say? I think you need to unmute yourself.
Just to reiterate what my colleague has said, really, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but just to emphasise, local residents are extremely, extremely concerned. They were expecting a shop on the ground floor of this building, you know, when the permission was first granted. It's a horrible shock to us to discover that it's going to be another licensed premises, and moreover, a licensed premises that is likely to be a magnet to, you know, the vulnerable and homeless people who beg on the streets here. You know, this is going to be another clientele for them, but a lot of them are going to be wanting to be invited in. And so this sort of the best safeguard I guess we can hope for now, given what's already been granted, is that at least there's some very, very strong policing. I think we would much prefer there to be a closing time for this not to operate 24/7. The idea that residents and their guests have 24/7 access to alcohol in this space on our doorsteps is terribly worrying for us. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Hughes. If I could just clarify, nothing's been granted yet. We haven't made a decision. If the applicant wants to respond to those points.
Yeah, yes, just a couple of points, if I may. It seems there's been some misunderstanding about the bar. The bar is going to close. And after that time, alcohol is only going to be available to residents and their guests. It's going to service the hotel rooms. So the bar will close. I'm sorry if that wasn't made abundantly clear.
Well,
so there
when
is a closing time.
When is it going to be closed? There's no indication of when it was going to close.
The closing times are the hours from LP3 that we've given in the application. Anyway,
if I can assist,
the license at all.
I think this is a point that was made earlier in relation to the two different meanings of guest. I think there's residents and non-residents, and then hotel residents. So do you mean people who are staying, because the supply of alcohol and guests, I think this is what is page 4, the standard hours of alcohol should be available to hotel residents and their guests 24/7.
That's correct, but it's not going to be as an open bar 24 hours a day. The bar is going to close, and then alcohol will be available to residents and their guests to take back to their rooms.
Okay, so that's, yeah, okay. I think that does clarify it certainly a little bit for me.
In terms of deliveries, I have some difficulty with the proposition put before you that all deliveries are a problem. Is it a problem, for example, if someone comes and delivers newspapers via the front door of the hotel, the newspapers to be read by residents and by the hotel residents?
No, it's deliveries for licensable activities.
Well, exactly. The deliveries for licensable activities are going to go through the service area, so they're serviced internally.
Not according to the waste policy document.
I think the policy documents mention ad hoc deliveries. The policy document covers all deliveries, specifically licensable activity deliveries, the ones that you're concerned about, the noisy barrels and things like that, would be done internally via the servicing access. This is a beautiful hotel. They're not going to spoil it by rolling barrels through the front door.
Definitely not a beautiful hotel. I can see it from here, believe me, it is not.
I mean, okay, I mean, I think the suggestion is that there should be a condition in terms of deliveries, and I think between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Is that going to be an issue for deliveries for licensable activities? Is that going to be an issue if we decided to condition that?
I wouldn't have thought so, no.
Thank you. Okay, I think unless there's any outstanding points, and I think those were certainly the major points that were, very helpfully raised by the resident objectors. I think we should now move on to very brief summings up. I think these should focus on the licensing objections and in relation to the special policy area as well. So, I mean, if people can be as brief as possible, we've had an extremely thorough discussion. I mean, obviously this is quite, as everyone just pointed out, quite a significant development in many ways. It is within the special policy area, so I think it does justify this type of discussion. But we can have a brief summing up and just putting the major points and not repeating points that have already been made. Thank you. If you start with the applicant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a very good application, a very thorough application from an extremely experienced and high-class operator. It comes with numerous conditions to promote the licensing objectives, backed up by a whole host of other procedures to promote the licensing objectives. In terms of your cumulative impact policy, the applicant has always been aware of and mindful of the policy and has taken significant steps to evidence how it will deal with cumulative impact, both in terms of the conditions and its specific document dealing with cumulative impact in the supplementary agenda. We're very sorry that the residents don't want us here. This premises is something that has been in the planning for a long time, and it was always going to be the case that the hotel was going to apply for a premises license. Hotel needs a premises license. We strongly suggest that this is an application that could and should be granted as an exception to your special policy area, your cumulative impact area, and we kindly invite you to grant this application subject to the conditions that we have suggested and those that we have agreed. And unless you have any questions, Chair, that's my summing up.
Thanks, that's very helpful. Thank you for being brief. Can I now turn to the responsible authorities? Mr. Tuitt?
Thank you, Chair. I won't go over too much over ground again. Essentially, we've heard it is a large-scale development. It is within the Dalston Special Policy Area. So we've heard a lot of discussion about that. And I think the conditions do go some way to mitigating some of those, some of the concerns that have been raised by myself, by the police, by residents also. But I think on balance, with other ways of managing various impacts, we might be able to grant this license today.
Thank you very much. Now can I turn to the resident objectors? Mr. C4, do you want to start?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm pretty disappointed with, I don't know why licensing is actually making representations if they're going to promote the application. It's not clear the bar is going to close from the application document at all. I think you can see that for yourselves. There's no actual indication that the operating hours of the bar is going to close at an appropriate hour. As for deliveries for licensable activities, I'm concerned there will be deliveries throughout the night at the front, which will obviously disturb residents. And it's not clear that the differential persons, I don't see how that's going to be that is going to be able to be enforced. I think it's rife for abuse, both by patrons and by the management, who may just not be bothered to take people out. They are a commercial concern after all. I think capacity is a real problem. They're looking for a fire risk assessment. I don't think that's the proper way of going about it. I don't think they've really properly considered how the capacity would affect the licensing objectives. And residents weren't very keen on a hotel. It doesn't really offer anything to us. We certainly didn't want, given the dozens of licensed premises, the problems in the area, which are very serious and a real problem for both the council. It costs the council a lot of money it costs far more money for the council to deal with all the problems here than the nighttime economy actually makes for anyone, makes for the council. It's an expensive business for the council, this. And we certainly didn't want a destination cocktail bar with entertainment. That was never planned for, was never part of the planning application. It's only just landed on us with any understanding of it just now. So we really didn't want that, that's for certain. I just say, the core hours of the licensing policy and the special policy area are important. That I haven't seen any way that the management has given me any comfort that they're up to the job of doing this, particularly with the conditions. Some of the conditions are welcome, but there's not enough conditions here to comfort me, particularly in terms of the vertical drinking and the other things. And it is absolutely imperative that this license is properly in place as you determine it this evening. This will be set in stone for some time, and it's very important it's done properly. It's a lot of work, and I think you needed more help from your officers in preparing this. The application is unclear, and the responsible authorities haven't done a great job here. Thank you. That's my summation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Seaforth. Professor Howes?
I think one thing, I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I do welcome the statement that this hotel really wants to give back to the local community in some way. And I would love to see that made concrete. For instance, there was a scheme whereby members of Pubwatch, who are, to which a lot of the local other licensed premises belong, actually, put money in through a voluntary levy into helping pay for wardens, for Hackney Council wardens to help manage the public spaces in this very densely concentrated area. I think it would be really nice if this hotel were to make a real concrete commitment to giving back to the local community in collaboration with Hackney Council, perhaps through enhancing the warden scheme or something of that sort. We've heard some marvellous words of gestures of goodwill towards the local community. It'd be nice to see those concretised in some way.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's the end of the public discussion this evening, unless anyone wants to make any of the officers want to make any further contributions. So I'm not inviting any of the parties to make further contributions.
Yeah, Chair, I would just say, just to that last point made by Professor Hughes, if you are minded to grant the licence, we of course do have the late night levy within Hackney. So if the hours are as granted, or if the hours of alcohol are beyond midnight, then the premises will be liable to paying the levy, of which some of that funding goes towards warden schemes and policing and other schemes to promote the licensing objective.
But if the hours are not granted in that way, I think it would also be very helpful if Professor Howes' suggestion was followed, or in addition to other community contributions. Thank you very much. I think we're now going to conclude the public part of these proceedings. So thank you everybody for attending this evening. I know it's not easy to attend hearings of this type, but we're probably getting slightly more used to it than we were at the beginning. And we'll now retire, and a decision is going to be sent to all parties within 5 days.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Many thanks, everyone. Good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.